Hey guys, welcome back to another album review. Today I'll be discussing the new Slipknot album, We Are Not Your Kind, because that is how you say it. And today I've brought on a special guest.
Hey guys, my name is Matt. I have my own channel called In the Furnace. If you've never heard of me before, I'm in her comment section a lot, but you know, I talk about music, mostly pop music, but I've heard quite a bit of metal myself, and I've actually been listening to Slipknot for about, 5 years. So, I have a lot to say about this album, as does Monica, so we should just get right into the band.
I've been listening to Slipknot for about 4 years now. This is the first album cycle where I am a fan and I can actually witness singles come out and everything like that. And because I thought that all of their albums were at least solid, and I'm not counting Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat because that's not a Slipknot album. I don't care what anyone says. I was hoping this would hold up or be pleasantly surprising. You never really know what Slipknot will do. So that leads us to right now with We're Not Your Kind. But before that was All Out Life coming out on its own on Halloween, and they took the lyric "We Are Not Your Kind" from that song, but then only included All Out Life as a bonus track.
In Japan.
Yes.
Not in America.
In Japan, to be exact. I had only heard Unsainted and Solway Firth, which I still have no idea how to pronounce, so I'm just
I think you said it right. Whereas for me, upon hearing these singles, this is not my first Slipknot album cycle of being a fan of them, because I became a fan of them a few months before they came back for the Grey Chapter. So I remember when they first started posting weird things on their Facebook, and it ended up being the lyrics from the bridge of the Negative one, and that song came out, and then Devil and I came out, and I really enjoyed those songs, and I still do to this day, and Grey Chapter is a solid album. However, with these newer singles, I did not care for All Out Life at all, and Unsainted had to grow on me, and I still feel like it took a lot of elements from their previous work. So between that and Solway Firth, which again was alright but not amazing to me, I was worried that we were going to be getting something a little bit inferior to the Grey Chapter, just because it seemed like a bit more of the same sound but not quite up to snuff. Get it? Snuff.
I love snuff. What separates this from the Grey Chapter a lot, even though they have the same producer and the same kind of sound going on, is the lyrics. Lyrically, the Grey Chapter had a very obvious cause behind it. But then with this, Clown had been saying in interviews he thinks this will be their last album. They've all been experimenting with side projects a lot. Jim Root is still in Slipknot even though he left Stone Sour. There's just been a lot of odd things pointing towards this being the end of their career. And that is a lot of pressure on them, I would say. There's a lot of expectations I had for this album.
And it's not to say that the band doesn't deal with any sort of darkness anymore. There's definitely things going on in their lives that could influence this album. I know a couple months before the album dropped, Clown's daughter tragically passed away, and I think that happened a little too close to the album's release for it to really impact what happened on the album, but still, those types of things have happened in their lives throughout the past few years, and so there was a lot of darkness for them to channel into this album. With all of that being said, what did we get with We Are Not Your Kind?
Going into the overall sound, the overall production, it's very Grey Chapter-esque, as I mentioned before. I find it interesting how clean a lot of the choruses were. Not just, of course, talking about clean vocals, but clean guitar tones. Less abrasive percussion, less bass. Unsainted has a chorus that's really clean. It does have a good hook to it, and the choir vocals throughout the rest of the song, honestly, that melody line sounds better with Corey singing it rather than the choir singing it. So I enjoy the chorus to that song quite a bit, but I do think it sounded a little too light overall for Slipknot. And I don't want to be like, it needs to be brutal and heavy, because, I mean, Circle is one of my favorite songs of theirs, but I feel like this song could have used more of that. Birth of the Cruel did have a little bit more of a bass presence. There are choices like that, and choices like the piano in the song Spiders, which I am still very indecisive about. There are some interesting production choices like that. I'd say Spiders and My Pain are the most intriguing choices with the production, the most unique for them, and then the rest of it was more like Grey Chapter Part 2.
Definitely, especially with songs like Unsainted, which, spoiler alert, Unsainted is actually my favorite song on the album, so from whatever I say here, it's all downhill from here. I was not huge about the album as a whole. It's not bad, but it's far from their best. So with Unsainted, I just felt like there was a lot of ideas and stuff going into this song that they had already done before and had done better. Like, it has that same sort of thrashy energy that you have on a song like The Negative One or Sarcastrophe. It just doesn't have the same momentum and energy altogether. And I don't know if it's some slight difference in production or something, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm 5 years older now, but it just doesn't resonate the same way that those songs did back then.
I will point again to Paul Gray's tragic death in influencing the heavier parts of the Grey Chapter. Because there's a lot of darkness on this album, like you had said. It's just the darkness seems more vague. Going back to before the Grey Chapter, I mean, there is certainly a big difference throughout their sound. It's an odd strategy for Slipknot's marketing, because they're like, Iowa levels of heavy, which this was not that, by the way, at all. They do try to pull from previous songs of theirs, and you can tell that they're obviously the same band doing this. It's not like they had a drastic sound change, it's just there's less intensity. Nero Forte is an example of a song that, while I really enjoy it overall and think it's one of the best songs on the album, I feel like it was begging to be heavier. As soon as Corey's like, "What's this?" The main riff sounds like it's trying to be so much heavier than it actually is.
Yeah, and it's hard to say if it's the band's fault or the producer's fault, but when you go back to the earlier Slipknot albums, there's a definite difference in the guitar tones and all of that. And like, I feel like their tones started getting softer more around the All Hope Is Gone era, but that album had other things going on that made up for it, like the guitar solos, for example. So, and this album and Grey Chapter both didn't really have guitar solos on them. I did want to bounce off of one comment you said about how you can still tell they're the same band, because there's a song on this album called Red Flag, where in the chorus they say, "You used to be something special, but you're nothing new." That right there is like my opinion of this album summed up, is that Slipknot had a really special, unique sound, and now this album is nothing new overall.
Burn.
As for the statement about Iowa levels of heavy, yeah, it's not that, but I'm also in a minority where I don't think Iowa was even heavy compared to Self-Titled. I felt like Self-Titled had this really raw aggression to it, especially in Corey's vocals. Like, there's an aggression he has on that album that he
doesn't have again.
He never has it again. And with Iowa, the problem is that they had just spent a year and a half touring and getting sick, promoting Self-Titled, and they were tired. And on that album, Corey sounds exhausted. You can really tell that they've been through a lot when they made that album, and it's and it makes it their most misanthropic record. And maybe that's why it's also my
nihilistic.
Maybe that's why it's my least favorite Slipknot album. Alas, that album does have a lot of darkness, but it came from a real place when they were going through a lot.
I didn't talk about Critical Darling at all yet. I want to highlight that song because the instrumentation has really good moments in it, and I feel like Slipknot is one of those bands where musically they can be so simple, but because of the energy they have, it's just infectious to listen to. And I feel like there are moments in Critical Darling where it accomplished that. Like in the pre-chorus, there was a little bit more rawness, but then a lot of these songs just felt like they dragged on. All of the choruses being repeated to death. Death because of death, because choruses are repeated to death.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and one thing about this album is that it's not very hooky. Like, the choruses on this album aren't as sticky as I would hope. Like, I mean, Unsainted has probably the most catchy chorus on the album, and yet it pulls so much from Sulphur, from All Hope Is Gone. Like, those choruses are so similar, in my mind at least. most of the other choruses on this album, they're all over the place. I mean, you have Nero Forte with like this call and response where there's high, clean vocals that you can barely make out, and then Corey's fast, like
wacky,
spit it out type.
Yeah.
And it's not really catchy. I mean, you remember it because it's so odd, but it's not really, doesn't really make for a catchy chorus.
It's quirky,
and then,
for sure.
And then Critical Darling comes right after it in the track listing, and the melody almost reminds you of Nero Forte's melody, except weaker, and Corey's vocals get weak there. In general, I just feel like the hooks could have been a lot stronger on this album. There's only a couple songs that had hooks where I really felt like they were doing something impressive. Spiders had a really interesting hook. While there weren't a lot of songs that I was individually a fan of, there were songs that had a lot of pieces that I liked. Like even Liar's Funeral had this, like, I don't know if you would call it a bridge or what.
It was like a refrain type of just random section.
And it had a call and response there too. And I thought it was a really good one. It was really catchy. I really like the bridge of Unsainted. It's the main reason why that's my favorite song on the record, despite everything I've said about it.
That
sounding
is true.
Watered down compared to older stuff, and the chorus biting from Sulfur. The bridge is probably one of the best moments on the album musically, I would say.
It is very unique. You know, I didn't think to talk about the bridge of Unsainted, but that is true. I like the whatever the heck sounds are going on, like the sampling and all that. It sounds kind of off, especially with the guitars doing what they're doing. It's like you hear it the first couple times, it repeats, and then you're like, I don't know about this, and then you start to really enjoy it, and you're like, that's cool and different. So Unsainted did have that going for it. And something about A Liar's Funeral is I did like how it built up. There are certain songs that have, you know, better structures than others. I feel like Critical Darling, My Pain, Orphan, Red Flag, those are all songs that I think could have benefited from more concise structuring and songwriting, you know, just in how many choruses there are and how long pre-choruses last and stuff like that, because a lot of these songs, especially near the end of the track listing, they're like 6.5 minutes long, 7 minutes, 6 minutes. It's just yeesh.
Long songs near the end.
Then there's Solway Firth, where I feel like the structure is a little bit all over the place, but the guitars are catchy enough to where I'm like, oh, it's that part again. Unsainted makes a little bit more sense. Spiders does as well. But a lot of these songs just felt like they're trying to go to so many different places at once. Nero Forte did have a neat bridge. I feel like it very seamlessly led back to the chorus. So there's a lot of hits and misses throughout the album in that sense.
For how much I've been talking about how this album feels like more of the same and how safe they played it, there are moments where I do think they took a bit more risks. Monica, you earlier mentioned the piano in Spiders.
Right.
And it's a really odd piano line, especially since the song, they build it in the key of B minor, but when you first hear that piano line, it doesn't really diatonically fit in that key. So it's really interesting how they sort of mash it together. And the end result of that is that Corey sounds kind of off-key in the first verse when he sings, but alas, I ended up enjoying that song quite a bit just for it being different. Whereas the other most experimental song, My Pain, has this like weird dinky little, I don't know if
Melody
it's
Martinez sounding.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Instrumentation.
If it's like a synth or a xylophone or what, but I did not care for that at all.
One last thing about structure. My Pain is an interesting one because it's the longest song on the album, clocking in at almost 7 minutes long.
So
but
long.
The first 2 minutes of the song, well, the first 30 seconds is pretty much silence. And then you hear this, like, a few sounds here and there, and I don't know if I would say it sounds kind of ambient there, but it's just, it very slowly starts up, and then it doesn't really get into the actual main song until 2 minutes in, which it works for some songs. I mean, Prosthetics from Self-Titled had a 2-minute long intro, but that intro was fun and catchy, and you had all the instruments coming in at different times, and it's like, wow, you could tell there's 9 members contributing to all of that. So I think long intros can work, but here it just felt like it took forever to get to the main point. and then the outro was long as well. It felt like it was building up to something that didn't exist.
Definitely the weirdest song on the album. So alas, I do feel that the band could have taken a few more risks on this album. The riffs, I think, could have done more with them, because after a while it's hard to not feel like they're recycling riffs, even if they are different riffs, you know, when they base them around the same sort of styles and stuff. I don't know.
And the same key.
Yeah, and the same keys. I just feel like there's more that they could do. I've heard many albums in the past by a variety of different bands where a lot of the songs will have similar approaches to them, but because it's within one album, you know, it sort of marks the style for the band there. But after multiple albums, you kind of expect growth and progression. And at the end of the day, this album doesn't feel like a step forward from the Grey Chapter. It just feels like a step to the side.
I'd say all of their albums leading up to this did have a distinct sound. With All Hope Is Gone, that's kind of when they started to tread into the sound they have now. I would say the Grey Chapter and We Are Not Your Kind, We Are Not Your Kind, are a little bit too alike in a lot of spots. I guess before moving on, I don't think I fully explained how much I do enjoy Solway, Firth, and Nero, Forte, because I feel like I'm saying a lot of negative things, so I want to emphasize how much those songs do save this album for me. When Solway Firth came out as a single, I freaked out. I was fangirling like all morning, and I just was like, they're back. Little did I know Solway Firth would be not only the closing track, but by far, in my opinion, the best song on the album. And I don't think anything else really came that close to it.
It's okay.
It's okay.
I was definitely not blown away by it like you were. That's okay.
It's okay.
But even though this album feels like a step to the side, as I just said, stylistically, in the production and the instrumentation, it feels like a step backwards in terms of both the vocals and the lyrics, because I mean, I thought Corey sounded a bit tired in spots on Grey Chapter, but in a way the tiredness was warranted based on all that they had gone through. In this album, he just sounds like a grumpy old man, just straight up. And his growling,
Damn
like...
kids, get off my lawn!
Basically, that's Corey on this album. That is Corey on this album. He's
not
still...
ashamed to admit it either.
Yeah.
He is literally, I mean... You're Making Me Hate You is an actual book that he wrote. And in a Loudwire interview, he literally said, this is my Damn Kids Get Off My Lawn book.
He did say that. And this is his Damn Kids Get Off My Lawn album. His screams, you know, they still have some bite to them, but they don't feel threatening or menacing. In fact, there were spots on this album where I actually laughed. I don't normally do that with Corey's vocals. Metal vocals shouldn't be funny. They're funny here.
They shouldn't be funny unless you're Suicide Silence.
Even though I keep saying Unsainted is my favorite song on the album, the way he opens the second verse, he's like, decision. Like, there's just something about it that, I don't know, it makes me laugh.
I remember you mentioning that you didn't like the way he said indecision, and I still have not really picked up on why that sounds weird. Like, I've listened to the song a bunch of times, and maybe like the next time I'll listen specifically for that, but that actually didn't bother me too much.
It's one of my nitpicks, for sure, but throughout the album you have lots of instances of weaker clean singing. The weakest example of such is probably the chorus of Critical Darling. Liar's Funeral also has some weak verses that do not at all warrant his sudden scream of liar.
It comes out of nowhere, and then it immediately dies back down into the verse again. Like, when I first listened to that song, I was shocked. Not in a good way. You see, it's like, I know that their whole scheme is shock value, and it usually works really well for them. I feel like a lot of the softer moments on the album were weak vocally, which is really weird. Maybe this is one of my nitpicks because I don't like Stone Sour, and I never really have. Because I don't like that side of him as much.
Well, here's the thing, is that, in my opinion, Stone Sour has been getting weaker too. Their latest album, Hydrograd, or as I lovingly refer to it, Hydrobad, it was more mediocre than anything else. Lovingly, yes. That album was so weak vocally with all the clean singing. It just felt very Whereas the two albums they put out before that, just a few years prior, House of Golden Bones Part 1 and 2, were a lot stronger. And Through Glass, a Stone Sour song from
love that song.
Well over 10 years
to
ago.
Be fair. Yeah.
That song's great. That song is great. And Corey sounds really good on it. So he has a lot of great clean singing moments throughout their career. I think I would highlight as well Vermilion Part 2, Circle, Snuff. But on this album, I can't think of a single softer song where I would say, yeah, he sounds really good. I also don't know if he was applying himself as much on this album. Like, maybe he didn't put in quite as much effort. I actually had the same sort of feeling with, I hate to say it, the last Linkin Park album. I thought Chester sounded really tired on that album.
That is
vocally.
Fair, yeah.
And so, maybe it's just a sign of age.
Yeah, this is really odd, but I actually was not unimpressed with his scream vocals. I don't feel like they were much worse than on the Grey chapter. Like, I feel like he maintained that pretty well. I didn't expect that because, I don't know, maybe I've just become kind of numb to... Maybe I've become so numb I can't feel you there. Sorry, they weren't impressing me, but they weren't disappointing me. So there's that, but the clean vocals disappointing me so much is so odd. Like, I mean, I can highlight a few moments where he just sounds off pitch. The verse of Spiders, the beginning of A Liar's Funeral, Critical Darlings Bridge.
Oh, I forgot about that.
You're so critical! There's moments like the beginning of Solway Firth. Odd. I feel like
Counting all the killers!
I feel like it would kind of make anybody laugh. I can kind of thank the song for that. It brought that meme to us. Brought that gift, that blessing to us.
Thank you, Corey.
Yeah, I would say screamed vocals about the same, whereas the clean vocals were not as good. Mostly the softer clean vocals. I'd say the more intense belting was fine.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think of Unsainted's chorus and I'm like, hey, that's pretty good. He sounds good there.
Unsainted's chorus, the part of Liar's Funeral where there's that call and response, the call part is clean and it sounds beautiful. Probably my favorite vocal moment on the entire record, honestly.
Are we ready to move on to the lyrics?
I think so. I feel bad that I've been so critical of this album. I guess you could say it's not a critical darling. In Red Flag, we really get the full depth of this album right here with this line, I wish you all would off and go back to hell where you belong.
Iowa.
It does sound like a lyric from one of their first two albums.
This is how Orphan opens up. I wept when I realized there were no more demons left to conquer. An opportunity to show my feelings with skin so thick you'd swear. Oh, no, you swear it was armor.
I don't know. I just feel bad, man. Like, if your mindset is, oh no, now that I have nothing left to conquer, what am I? Then I just feel bad for you.
You know what that reminds me of?
What?
Supposed to Be by Icon for Hire. What am I supposed to be without my depression is the whole sentiment of that song, because a fan ended up inspiring that. A fan ended up saying that, and then they wrote that song. So that is basically this. It's like, that's sad when you've been in such a bad place for so long that the second you get out of it, now you kind of miss it.
As we've been just talking about these lyrics, I'm realizing just how much more sad they were than I initially gave them credit for. Are you okay, Corey? Please, I hope you're doing okay. I really do.
A lot of the things they were going for, I don't think they accomplished or reached. That fact just goes to show how sad the whole situation is. And maybe when Corey Taylor said it'll be Iowa levels of heavy, it meant Iowa levels of sad.
Maybe
because Iowa was really sad. I mean, everyone says it's so angry and but it's like, underneath all of it, it's a really sad album.
Overall, this album is far from perfect. It does still feel like a step to the side in terms of how it sounds from Grey Chapter. It feels like a step back vocally, and lyrically it feels like a step into the abstract, and more often than not it doesn't really connect, for me at least. And now that I've actually talked through these lyrics quite a bit, I could see it, how it could connect with other people, but just not with me.
The last thing I want to say, kind of summing it up, is I just hope after this album, they can realize that they don't have to be in that dark place to write good music, you know. They don't have to force themselves back into dark mental places because they feel like they should or they feel pressured to. I know a lot of Toxic fans have said, you know, oh, the band used to be so much better when everyone was on drugs, and I feel like that's so toxic to say to recovering addicts, you know, recovered addicts, because it makes them want to go back to it. This album as a whole is not bad. It had a few really, really great tracks that I was really impressed with. And I'd say Nero, Forte, and Solway, Firth, and parts of Birth of the Cruel were also very good as well. Those moments do make up for a lot of the wonky mistakes, you know, and the shortcomings of this album. Because of the moments that are for me, I would say my score averages out to a pretty strong 6 out of 10. I wanted to give this a higher score so badly because this has been the lowest score I've given a Slipknot album since Mate, Feed, Kill, Repeat. And I don't want to admit that because it makes me sad, because I love the band and I can't even emphasize how big of a fan I am of them. This one was just a little bit of a misstep.
Whereas I'd be a little bit harsher. Same score, 6 out of 10, but mine would be a light. I've been listening to this band since Grey Chapter, and I feel like a big reason why that album even clicked with me in the first place was because I was a new fan at the time. Ultimately, this is just a collection of really long songs that don't have as much punch to them or as much melody to them or as much groove to them as I would want from the band. So that's the
I can't even say I hope you enjoyed, because I feel like people are just going to be having those existential crises when they watch this. So I hope you found this review interesting and that our points of view were interesting to hear about, you know.
I hope you don't hate me.
I hope you don't hate Matt. Hope you don't hate me either.
And if you don't hate me, feel free to go on and subscribe to my channel in the furnace, link in the description. Thanks for watching. Either way, whatever you thought, appreciate it. And thanks to Monica for her letting me be on her channel and stuff. It's cool.
See you in the next video.
I'm not used to sitting on the floor. I'm in so much pain.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not used to sitting with my legs out. My knees are like,
My everything.
My pain.